Hello everybody, it's vanburman here, welcome back, and today we're going to be taking a look at the AMD 5670 in CrossFire, and I'm also mixing up by making it the silent build system as well. But before I start talking about that, I've got a bit more of an overall sort of update on the test bench and stuff. So I've had some issues with it. I think some of it is to do with compatibility with Ryzen and some of the older graphics cards, or AMD graphics cards actually, and I think I've had a bit of bad luck in getting a few duds, which obviously happens from time to time. So I've changed out some stuff. Obviously I had the 700 watt power supply before, and some of the cards I was looking at, like 700 watts should be fine for a single graphics card, really. Some of them have been dual GPUs, of course, and that naturally, usually, the wisdom is to have like 800 or 850. So, so I've gone and I've bought a new PSU, which you can probably see, which is the Corsair 850X for too much money, because they are stupid at the minute because of all the power supply shortages. So I got it second hand, and however, it does have the 0 RPM fan mode, so that's something that we can look at, and we'll be seeing sort of how silent it is. But it's just so in case you may notice the difference, and it's not all been tidied up yet. So because they were sort of in between both of the builds. So without further ado, let's hand over to me. Thanks, vanburman. It's vanburman here. Right, so we're going to start by just taking a look at the system as is. I'm going to talk you through what we've got in there, and then we're going to run a GPU benchmark, or a benchmark. Heaven benchmark, in fact, actually, which I've not run for a very long time. And we will see if it stays silent. So I'm going to be taking off my microphone and holding it up while we do the. In fact, we'll do the stress test first. So I'm just running it on DirectX 11 medium settings because it's well, what can I say? What's the best way I can put it? Not really powerful enough to do any more. I think we get an average roughly. Oh, I'm not going to overclock to the minute, but or have I? No. We get roughly an average just under 30 FPS overall. So I'm just going to hold. I'm going to stop talking. And I'm going to hold up the microphone to the PC because there is a little bit of noise coming off it actually. Realistically, this is about as silent as you'll get it, and the clicking sound from the Core 1 from the graphics cards is actually noticeable. You wouldn't notice, obviously, in a case that would dampen that particular sound. But I'm not sure if it's like I have ordered a very cheap sound gauge. Anyway, and I was hoping to have that by the time I did this video, but apparently it's not coming until the end of this month. So, and I ordered it a month ago, so I can only imagine that it's probably coming from China, I would have thought, but I didn't buy it knowing it was coming from China. And just to see how it compares to, for example, my main computer next to it, because that's fairly quiet now, actually. But as you can tell, like, it's not loud at all. We are nitpicking, and we're going to the absolute nth degree in terms of sound and what have you. So I'll pick up the camera now and do a bit of a sweep over and get into the main crux of the video. So, as you're well aware, we've got the HD 5670 here in CrossFire, two of them. They do share exactly the same overclocking settings, and we do only have the one gigabyte of VRAM, unfortunately, to draw upon, but that's the case in all sort of CrossFire SLI arrangements. It cost £31.50 altogether. The second one was slightly more expensive, about £3.50 more than the first one, but I figured if we were going to do this, we'll get matching pairs, have them both passively cooled, because I think, doing a quote-unquote silent build was something that I definitely wanted to do at some point, and with me upgrading the power supply, it was just a happy coincidence. We're able to have literally no fans, as that CPU caller is showing us. So yeah, that particular one is the no fan 80 something or other, and basically it's the only one that they sell now, I believe, and it is suitable up to a processor for a TDP of 80 watts, and the 1600AF is 65 watts, so not a problem, even though it was overclocked, and we did hit the very high 80s on the graphics cards and the processor, I must say, during very extensive stress tests. So just, potentially worth bearing in mind. You are going to get some high temps, and I would think, you need a fairly roomy case maybe for this sort of setup. Not that anyone today is going to run anything like this, but I did have to run Windows 8 to get this to work properly. Crossfire was this particular Crossfire is very unstable on Windows 10, and yeah, Windows 8 was like going back in time and using Vista, and you can really see that Windows 8 was not suitable for the vast majority of Windows users. It is a bit of a tack on for laptops and all that. So starting with, we're going to look at Left 4 Dead, and as you can see, there's quite a big increase across the board between the Crossfire and non-Crossfired versions. 22% increase in the 1% low and 63.8% increase in the average. I think this is fairly indicative of what we will see going forward, and it becomes from semi-playable to 100% playable. I know it's a very old game, Left 4 Dead, but we see that roughly across the board. Now in these following charts, we're just going to see the rate of change. So the higher the graphs, the better the outcome between the single card and the Crossfire card. War in the North is one of the exceptions because it capped out at 60, so the improvement is very minor. And Shogun 2 actually has a negative impact on the 1% lows. Now, I will say that's not an uncommon trait that happens throughout these benchmarks, and it's mainly due to the latency that happens between pairing up two cards. I've seen it myself many times, having ran several SLIs in my own personal builds, and it is one of the trade-offs that you have to take into account, that you're asking two cards to work in tandem to produce your frame rates. We get that once again in Grid 2, but we do see sizable gains across the board in the other titles, as well as a 54% gain in the average. So they're pretty decent numbers. I think the thing to remember is adding two cards, 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2 in terms of performance. But that's just the way it goes. Skyrim got a massive average FPS boost here, but tanked on the 1% low. Once again, it's a matter of stuttering. And in The Witcher 2, we got a huge increase in the 1% lows, but that's due to the fact that the 1% low in the single card, I think, was like 10 frames per second. So anything that becomes even semi-playable is going to be a massive increase in that. But it's still good to see. It still shows there is there was at least some viability in running Crossfires. So in this graph, we've got the red as the Crossfire and the blue as a single card. So I know it's been difficult to read, but I just wanted to try and get it on one graph. Feel free to pause it and have a look if you're actually interested in the numbers. But generally, across the board, there's nothing that doesn't have an average FPS improvement. The only difference is now that we get a much bigger gap in the variance between the 1% low and the averages. And this really sort of took the wind out of my sails a little bit, because I came to a result where, according to my metrics, the single card is better than the Crossfire, because you've got this issue of having a wider gap in FPS between your 1% lows and your averages. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of this kind of technology. And just for a final conclusion, I've done some scores, and it looks like on average you're getting a roughly 40% increase overall. So probably really not worth it. There you go. So as a little bit of bonus content, we're going to see if you can notice any difference between earlier and now with the main computer on in terms of sound. I think there's definitely a very different noise profile, and it definitely is louder, but yeah, I don't know what would be more annoying if you wanted like a proper silent, you know, a slight whoosh of fans or the ticking sound from the coil whine, because you know that is something you'll experience, I guess, although we're looking at one under load and one idle. So although the good thing about the main computer actually is that it doesn't get too much louder under load. So it's just one of them though, until I've got a device to test it, we will never know. So anyway guys, I'll thank you for watching again. Bye for now.